So with that, I would like to open things up to the senators at the table for any opening comments.
Senator Ken Rosenbaum, I'm here to listen to the public, and I'll make some brief comments at the end. With that, that's all I have for now.
Good.
Senator Molly Donahue, I also want to hear from everyone here today, but I do have a few comments made myself as a special educator currently teaching. I would like to start with no Iowan asked. It helps nobody when you look at the actual bill language. It does not do anything that the governor had originally intended, that it would help with special education scores, but there's nothing in here that indicates that that would actually happen. Nothing. These are ways to take funding away that all schools need. The AEAs provide services at an economical cost. It's so much better than what you can get in the private sector. And there is no part of the AEA that can be dropped off that wouldn't hurt special education students, because the services that are provided to all students through the AEAs also are provided to special ed students. They happen to get special ed services as well, but everything that goes into our public schools also is there and intended for all students in the building, and that includes special ed. So dropping off any part of this bill or any part of those departments hurts all the special education as well. It will not help fix the scores. There is so many things that our AEAs do for our schools, from mental health services to special education, consulting, and school psychologists. They are the go-to if there is a shooting at a school. They're the first people there to help, because they know the school districts, they know the people there, they know the protocols for the school, the crisis plan, and that is incredibly important. We cannot lose those services. They just simply cannot be lost. They would hurt my students. They'll hurt all students, but the worst part of this bill, it will really hurt our rural schools. They don't have the same opportunities the urban centers have. They don't have the same services available through the private sector that the urban centers have. Our rural schools are already suffering. We don't know the full extent that the vouchers from last year will have on them quite yet, but we know it's affecting them. And then the second part of this bill, the teacher pay, we know we need to do something about it, but these are two very separate bills in one bill. We need them to be separated. They cannot go together. They don't go together. There's no reason for them to be together. With that said, I just wanted to make sure that I want to hear from all of you. I know that this bill is not what people wanted. We have over 300 pages on the website of all for this bill, on 300 pages. So with that, I will end my comments and turn it back over.
I procedurally, so everyone knows, the bill, thank you. The original bill is the one that we will actually be acting on, even though 2 days after the original bill, an amendment was already made to the original bill based on feedback that the governor had taken and her staff from public, educators, legislators. So even though we're going to be talking about the bill itself, feel free to speak on the amendment as well, because this bill, the original bill, is no more. Okay. That's probably the appropriate place for the original bill. So with that, I would like to have Molly with the governor's office give us a better explanation of the bill than what I gave.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. My name is Molly Severn, the legislative liaison for Governor Reynolds. In 1974, the Iowa legislature established a statewide network of 15 area education agencies, or AEAs, to serve children and students with disabilities from birth to age 21. Since 2000, voluntary mergers have reduced the number of AEAs to 9. Today, Iowa students with disabilities are performing below the national average, even though Iowa spends $5,331 more than the national average of per pupil expenditures for special education services. Across NAEP testing cycles in 2017, 2019, 2022, Iowa students with disabilities ranked 30th or worse on 9 of 12 assessments, and the Iowa statewide assessment of student progress spring 2023 assessment revealed an unacceptable 41% proficiency gap for students with disabilities as compared to overall student results. AEAs had over $529 million in revenues for fiscal year 2023, yet have had little meaningful oversight or accountability over the years. While many states have regional educational support agencies like AEAs, Iowa is the only state that requires its school districts to pay into an education support agency and mandates the school use that same agency for special education services. As the system works today, if our districts are not satisfied with what their AEA offers, their only option is to pay above and beyond that amount that they have already been forced to pass through to their AEA. AEA employs more than 3,400 staff members compared to the Iowa Department of Education's 555. The average compensation package for an AEA chief is more than $312,000. For comparison, the average public school district superintendent's total compensation is almost $100,000 less. AEAs own or lease at least 54 properties, and their average administrative overhead is estimated at 19%. They're too big, they're too distracted, and they're too expensive. Based on feedback provided from the legislature and stakeholders, the governor has since provided, as mentioned by Senator Evans, an amendment to Senate Study Bill 3073, and today I'll provide an overview of what the amended language would do. 1, it would provide Iowa school districts local control of their special education and education services funds. AEAs can continue to provide all of their same services, and schools drive the timeline, and nothing has to change. If a school wants to send their entire allocation to their AEA, they can. AEAs are required to provide special education services to schools if requested by June 1 in year 1, or February 1 in year 2 and beyond. AEAs may provide special education, and media services at any time. It restores general supervision authority to the Department of Education as required by federal law. With a net cost reduction of approximately $20 million, special education compliance returns to the DE under a division of special education with staff based across the state. This restored special education division will ensure that oversight is independent of service delivery. All service providers remain in and employed by their local school district and AEAs, and AEA boards will become advisory with the exception of the ability to transfer property. AEAs will continue to provide special education services from birth through age 21, including all early access services. They'll also provide special and general education services to juvenile, detention, and foster care children and adults, and education services and media services requested by school districts. The proposal removes funding for media services and shifts funding for professional development and mental health. It removes media services funding, which is about $33 million of property tax relief. It also moves a small portion of professional development funding, about $2 million, and mental health funding, about $3.4 million, to the Department of Ed. DE will be using that professional development funding to provide free access to mandatory training for all teachers, both private and public schools. And lastly, it provides the Department of Administrative Services and Iowa Department for the Blind with property disposition authority. DAS will assume ownership of all real property and leases and work with the Department of Ed and AEAs to prepare a building disposition plan. Districts who gave or sold properties to the AEAs will have the right to reclaim those properties. And the Iowa Department for the Blind will have the right of first refusal for all brailing equipment and materials, as well as assistive technology for the blind and visually impaired. And to speak on the teacher salary portion of the bill. Iowa last adjusted the statutory minimum teacher salary in 2013. As a result, we rank among the bottom half of US states for average starting teacher salary, according to the National Education Association. By increasing salary minimums for Iowa's teachers, we will be ranked in the top 5 states for average starting teacher salary, greatly improving our ability to attract, recruit, and retain quality educators. Whatever improvements we make to our education system, the success of our students will always depend on great teachers. The governor proposes investing $47.1 million in new funding to increase the statutory minimum teacher salary from $33,500 to $50,000, as well as investing $25.8 million of new money to create a statutory minimum teacher salary of $62,000 for teachers with 12 years of experience. The governor also proposes investing $23.1 million in new funding to establish teacher salary supplemental tiers with minimum floors to equalize funding for equalized funding by school district size, and for those that are close to or have reached the minimum salary requirements. With me today, I have Mackenzie Snow, Director of the Department of Education. I also have Jane Dufault, the Governor's Education Policy Advisor, as well as Director Kelly Garcia, Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. We are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. You did that much more eloquently than I could have. So with that, we will start the public comment piece right now. Please try to limit and Aaron's going to run the timer on this. We won't just carte blanche cut you off at 2 minutes, but try to respect that time so we can get as many people to speak as possible. So we'll start. Yeah, announce yourself and if you are in favor or opposed to the bill, so I know how to go from there.
Hi, I'm Sandy Conlon with the American Federation for Children. We are registered in favor of the bill. Last year, AFC supported the school choice bill because of the increased options and accountability for Iowa parents. We are supporting this bill for the same reason. The U.S. Department of Education has cited Iowa's special education program as, quote, needing assistance, and has done so for several years in a row. Unfortunately, the state's hands are tied in addressing this problem because of the lack of transparency and accountability and the requirement that all special education funding go directly to the AEAs. This requirement also takes away a tool for parents to hold the system accountable. The hands of their elected school board officials are tied because they don't control the funding either. And the way that parents keep their schools accountable is through those elected school boards. This bill will restore oversight authority to the Iowa Department of Education while also giving more freedom to schools to determine what is best for the kids in their district. Thank you.
So someone who is opposed to the, step on up.
My name is Holly Messenger. This is my son, Kieran. He's a second grader in West Des Moines and lives with significant disabilities. Kieran currently has an extensive AEA team who supports him directly, providing therapy on a regular basis in the school setting. That team, in turn, has a supportive, collaborative team within the AEA. My son uses an eye gaze communication device. When his speech language pathologist gets stuck or has a question, she has an entire assistive technology team to reach out to. They are experts in high-tech communication devices and can provide her the support and education to then turn around and provide my son with the best quality speech services possible. When my son's special education teacher, who is a longtime outstanding educator, gets stuck on how to present educational material or assess what my son knows, she has an entire significant disabilities team to consult. They will come in to observe, brainstorm, and collaborate with her, giving my son the best learning environment possible, maximizing his academic growth. You are not going to be able to efficiently and economically get that level of collaboration with a cobbled together piecemeal fee-for-service approach, and my son's education will suffer because of it. Thank you.
Speaking, someone who is in favor of the bill.
Should I dress for a sauna? Tony Phillips with Iowans for Tax Relief, and we are registered in favor of the bill. And we want to thank you all for taking time to examine this issue. It's critical that the state effectively delivers services for our most vulnerable students. I think we can all agree on that, and we firmly believe that along with that, it takes good stewardship of the taxpayers' investment to make sure that we're delivering those services well. So focusing on accountability, improving outcomes for the families and the students we're trying to serve is always a worthwhile discussion in this building. So we thank you for having that today.
Thank you. Someone opposed?
Good afternoon, Senators. This room is very much similar to some of the classrooms I have visited around the state. Very full. We want to talk about test scores. Let's talk about the funding to public education the past 12 years. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Mike Veronic, and I'm president of the Iowa State Education Association. We are the union representing Iowa public education employees, AEAs, and community colleges. We have a vast retired membership and a growing student membership, all with one mission: to advocate for quality public education by placing students and educators at the center of everything we do. Today, I am talking to you from the perspective and experience of a 30 years in the classroom as a third grade teacher in the West Des Moines Community School District. One of my most valuable lessons was never to write off any student. My job was to gather all the tools and resources I could to recognize and nurture them. And to do that, I needed the support and assistance from my AEA. As you contemplate our nationally recognized AEA structures, two particular Iowa students come to mind. I know a young man who is a successful small business owner today with a family of his own. His business thrives. He has a family with 3 children who are growing. His success results from the early access to a team of AEA professionals, equipment, and services devoted to his success. It's the same story for a young woman who, as a third grader, needed support. Now she has her master's degree, has 4 children, and serves on a metro school board. While in my classroom, I worked with a team of AEA professionals focused on her success, including psychologists and counselors providing adaptive equipment and specialized lessons. I'm proud to report that both students are successful adult members of our community, contributing daily to the health and well-being of our state. No student can be written off or dismissed. Our AEAs are a vital part of the equation. Dismantling this support stream threatens the success of many, many students. This is not the Iowa way.
Mike, sir. Someone in favor?
Hello, my name is Vicki Morellos. I'm superintendent for the Council Bluffs Community School District. First of all, I would like to applaud the efforts to ensure every student, every Iowa student receives a high quality education. I also want to applaud the effort to seek a transformation of an outdated model of the AEAs. I support a change. For the past 7 years, I have watched millions of flow-through dollars from our district's demographics go directly to the AEA without having a voice for how those dollars would be used to support the needs of our district. In studying the proposed changes and the potential impact on our school district, my team has reviewed the positions currently provided by our AEA. From that analysis, we've determined we could provide the identified services for nearly $2 million less. We do not discount these dedicated AEA special education service providers who work side by side with our staff in support of our students. This is about utilizing the funding so that we can efficiently align their work to meet the individual needs of our students. This is also true for the media and ed service dollars of almost more than 1.1 million that flows to the AEA based on our enrollment, but we do not utilize. I acknowledge that some centralization of services is necessary to provide resources to smaller Iowa school districts that do not have the expertise or capacity to meet the needs of every student. Thank you for your careful consideration of the best path forward for a transformation that will have a positive and long-lasting effects for education in Iowa. Thank you.
Someone opposed?
Hi, I'm Betty Wolf, an Iowa educator. And I'm talking already because I only had a minute and a half.
Yep.
There's 3 main problems with this bill are on the question of accountability. The Department of Education has had the responsibility of accrediting our AEAs. Through that process, I would think suggestions for improvements would and should have been given. My question is, how well has the DE kept up with those responsibilities through all of the differing directors of late? The second one on spending too much on Iowa kids.
I heard in an Ankeny town hall from a mom of an autistic son, when that number of 5,000 whatever came out, she said, so what? But I also got some data from some educational experts here in Iowa who say that the census data in 2022 shows that for all of our kids, we're $3,000 below the national average. And what goes into that pot goes with special ed, and special ed kids need more money. They have more services. On the third point about giving the money to the school district so they can do whatever they want. I worked for a school district. I saw money used in a lot of different ways that I didn't agree with. Moving money to school districts who decide on a yearly basis how to spend it will force our highly trained professionals, our speech pathologists, our audiologists, our physical therapists, and others to work on a wait and see attitude of, will I be hired back next year? That's not a way to retain Iowa's best and brightest. On rural schools, they need that bank of AEA specialists, some years more than others. They aren't able to budget for the what ifs. Iowa has a lot of expertise. I see so many of you, I know so many of you. Iowa's not failing their kids, but every one of us can help schools do better. A true collaboration between our families, which I've seen everywhere, schools and AEAs using our own educational experts at the DE with guidance and support will solve many of our problems. Please do not move any portions of this AEA bill forward. I also would like to thank a teacher, because every day you should thank a teacher, and I would like to thank my speech teacher at Kirkwood Elementary School for helping me do this without my lisp.
Someone in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Todd Abrahamson, Superintendent at Okoboji School District. I am in a rural district. I am in support of this bill. Why I'm in support of this bill is we have options. You can either stay with the AEA, partial services, or opt out. This has been a long time coming. And what's disappointing to me is most of my colleagues that I've had discussions with this over the years, the superintendents, has always been about the flow through dollars with AEA on how we could better serve our students locally. With that said, silence is support. So if you're listening, colleagues out there, I ask you to step up to the plate, because you've stepped up to the plate with me, one-on-one conversations. And I am now representing that silence. Because we have to have a voice, and I appreciate this option that we get to hear all sides. That's why we live in a constitutional republic. With that said, I would also like to say some of the dollars and how we spent. Our team has been proactive in this bill. We are entirely in favor of keeping our financial portion of media services. We received only $67,021 worth of services with media services last year. We would be well ahead if we could control these funds ourselves. Again, I'm a small rural district. Our total flow through is $540,000. We do not receive $540,000 in services. If we did, I'd like to see the line item like we have to produce school districts to our school boards, and the accountability of those line items. We have no idea how this money is being spent. We are entirely in favor of keeping our portion of the education service. We have yet to receive $75,072 worth of services in that area. And we can have a more in-depth discussion and stop in my office in Okoboji, and I can break that down. So with that said, I'm totally in support of this bill. Okoboji, if you're familiar with Okoboji, has a strong special ed department. Our teachers are wonderful. And they also would like to have more services at the local control in our district to provide more, because we're getting short on those services. And I've heard rural districts will suffer. Well, we've been proactive. We've been on the phone. We know we can get a special ed director, behavior psychologist. We have a mental health services in our community called Elevate. So I would recommend to superintendents be active. Don't be status quo. Change is good. And prior to me becoming a superintendent, I was in the United States military and private sector. Change happens all the time. Status quo can sometimes deter us from the accountability
Thank you,
piece.
Todd. We gotta wrap it up. Thank you. Appreciate it. This is not an open forum, but thank you. Someone opposed?
Hey, Corey.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good.
So good afternoon, everyone. Brad Buck, Superintendent of Schools for Waukee and former Director of the Iowa Department of Education. I was a Branstad appointee. Some of this is going to sound similar to what I said before because my position hasn't changed on it. So thank you for this time to appear in front of you today. I appreciate it. The proposed legislation is a property tax relief, privatization of services, and extension of executive branch authority bill cloaked in the AEAs. Starting from those vantage points, its design is flawed and unlikely to lead to better outcomes for students with IEPs, which is what we all, of course, want. So that being said, I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to this bill. That being, first of all, let's start with the good in the bill. Raising teacher base pay in Iowa and that of 12-year veteran teachers is a good thing. Let's try to hang on to that. The bad in the bill are things like the removal of $35 million in media services funding. Media services are used by districts in a variety of ways. If these dollars are cut, there will still be a need for those services and no dollars will exist in the system to pay for those services. Another bad part of the bill is the lack of clarity regarding who's responsible for what work and how it will be paid for. Given the literal dozens of ways in which the AEAs in school districts are intertwined, identifying who does what in the associated funding streams will be a tall order, and especially so if the DE is substantially added to the mix. And finally, an additional bad part to the bill are the timelines for implementation. They are unrealistic to the point of being irresponsible. Simply removing them also doesn't work. The downright ugly portions of the bill include the significant shift of authority from local boards to the Iowa Department of Education. As a former director of the Iowa Department of Education, I respect and appreciate those individuals who serve at the DE and other state agencies. That said, given what has been observed there regarding the DE over the last few months and years, there would be an extremely limited belief by districts that the DE can deliver on these new expectations. Similar to the first point, the bill is proposed to take $20 million from the current system to hire 130 or more new state employees with no direct interface with students and no local accountability for the work that they do. Most importantly, perhaps, is that this is incredibly likely to create winners and losers. You just heard that that's not potentially going to happen. There's no way this math works like it's being described. I'm just telling you that. It's far more likely that larger districts will come out in better shape, and this bill will impact smaller and especially rural districts. You let him go. I'm going to keep going. So what could be next?
I cut him off at 240 and here's 243.
Really? Yeah, and for everybody that's here, we all want reform. We want better for kids. Slow the process down. Do it right. Kids deserve it.
People from Iowa are very passionate, aren't they? I love it.
Iowa nice.
So my name is Corey Seymour. I'm superintendent of Clear Creek Amana Community School District. I totally support our teachers receiving more pay. They deserve it. From my understanding, this bill is not to remove AEAs. Our AEAs are essential to the success of our district. I cannot speak for our other AEA programs, but without Grantwood AEA, we would have increased difficulties educating some of our subpopulations. They provide services that we would struggle to receive, especially with our special education programs. Now, however, my belief is that our schools should be able to control our flow through dollars. Over the years, the needs of our students are changing. The landscape of services for students and staff are also changing. With new challenges, we have to continue to evolve to support the needs of our school communities. Each district is different. And with control of our flow through funds, we will be able to create an individual education plan for our entire district. If services are adequate and addresses the needs of our district, we will continue to use them, as I stated with our special needs services. At the end of the day, our school districts should have a voice regarding flow-through dollars. Our districts are held accountable for the success and failure for every single student enrolled in our district. When the needs of a student are not met, the phones and emails come to district personnel. Districts deal with the day-to-day of the enrolled students. We should have control of the dollars that support the day-to-day. If services are good, we should keep them, but that should be the district's choice. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Justin Gross, Superintendent of Winterset. And not to reiterate Brad Buck's points, first off, I'm a father of a child who's been engaged in special education since she was 3 years old, receiving most of those services through the AEA. And I can say firsthand that those services benefited her growth as a student. No one here is against reform and getting better. Sadly, though, the argument made against AEAs and saying that they're at fault for the discrepancy in special ed is one out of convenience and not one grounded in facts. My fear with this bill, as has been shared with others, is the timeline for implementation without thorough thought through and the ripple effects of such changes. I've served districts from a 1A in Griswold to Winterset now, which is a 3A district. The needs of those districts are all very different. We benefit from a shared pool of resources that the AA provides, and if we had to go about it ourselves, we simply could not do. The argument that that would be available, as Brad indicated, the numbers do not back that up. We are lacking staff in these critical areas that we rely on the AA to provide that we can tap into. Things that will come to our district that this bill would pass that would negatively impact us. We use the AA for cybersecurity, as does 7 other districts. That would go away. We use them to staff the heart therapeutic classroom that 11 districts in our area send kids to on a daily basis, staffed all by AEA staff that we all benefit from. Support for work-based learning and the Iowa Work-Based Clearinghouse. I don't know if you know that, but the people behind that work are AEA staff, largely leading that in districts. All priorities of the government and the legislation at this time. That's where we're going to get support. It's not coming from the DE. The A fits so many needs for us that I think the speed at which this bill is being rolled out haven't been well thought through. There's no plan for how those services would continue. And as my colleague Brad Buck said, it's going to create winners and losers. Larger districts will be able to hire those staff, and the smaller districts are going to be scrapping to try and piece something together. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Someone in favor?
Oh. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Garcia. I'm the director of the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services. I'm thankful to be here today to talk to you about this incredibly important topic. And there's obviously nothing more powerful than hearing directly from parents. I came to Iowa more than 4 years ago to lead a system in need of great accountability and significant change. My time here has been flanked with significant events that changed the landscape of everything we do, of service delivery. It strained providers, and it challenged me to rethink the way we do our work. So in state government, there are no 2 spaces that need to be more closely linked than education and health and human services. Why? Because at the other end of our work are families and children, youth who need us. And today we have some significant strains. I have spent my time every summer, and on off days when you are not here, I spend time traveling all across Iowa. We host monthly town halls for parents of children, parents, caregivers, loved ones, individuals with disabilities, and individuals themselves. And I hear a resounding concern that what we are doing in Iowa is not enough. And in order to make changes, we have to have partners in this space. There are spaces where I've seen families come to a point of strain because school-based services were not intact, so much so that those children have come into foster care. That was one of the saddest days I've had in my tenure when I learned that that was the case. And that is a failure of our state and our system when that is the case. This is going to take collective partnership to change. But what I want to talk about is accountability. So however you choose to move forward, there are a lot of different pathways, but the pathways have to be linked in accountability. You certainly ask that of me and our system, and we have a lot of work to do. But we've committed to doing that. We won't be able to drive this home without partners on the other side of the table. Accreditation is one key tool to ensuring accountability. And there are certainly deeper dives that points that I could make and be happy to visit with you about the details of that. I briefed every one of you on the class action lawsuit that we are defending right now. School is embedded in that lawsuit. It's incumbent on us to change the system, but again, we have to have partners in order to do that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Klaus. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning for Ballard Schools and an Ankeny School Board member. I'm speaking to you today as an individual, not as a representative of the entire board. As a board member, I want to lift up two specific concerns: the premise that the DE should oversee special education because of a failure on the part of AEAs, and the bill's rapid timeline. Given the complexities of IDEA, I have grave concerns that the DE infrastructure will be up and running by midsummer in a way that supports students across Iowa. I'm grateful for the partnership Ankeny has with Heartland, but it is vital for you to understand that it is our teachers who provide the academic direct instruction for students. To say the AEAs are responsible for the academic outcomes is misleading at best, and to assume that shifting the management of special education support to the DE will lead to better outcomes is missing the mark entirely. The work of supporting improved student outcomes needs to happen at the school level, and asking the DE to continually approve the support and resources from the AEA is an extra step that could hinder timely services for students. As the Director of Teaching and Learning, I'd like to lift up how districts utilize AEA educational services to implement legislation. I want to share just two simple examples. House File 2392, passed in 2016, focuses on career and technical education redesign and career and academic planning. Districts lean heavily on the AEA for support of that implementation. They also lean heavily on AEAs to support Iowa Administrative Code 28162, the early literacy law. Taking this infrastructure and support away from districts will lead to less equitable implementation of the very laws that this legislature is asking our schools to implement in order to better serve our students. I thank you for your time today as you consider how the bill might impact the education of our Iowa students.
Someone in favor?
Hello, my name is Pam Grono, and I'm speaking today in favor of our state's efforts to improve special education in Iowa. As a parent of a child with special needs, my son has utilized the AEA services since he was 2, and we have very much appreciated those services. However, as my child has gotten older, it has become more and more of a challenge to ensure his educational needs are being met. While the AEA staff is included in my son's annual meetings, it is primarily his special education teacher who fosters much of his learning. She is the one who is responsible on a daily basis for providing my son his specially designed instruction minutes, which is where she works with him one-on-one at his academic level. This instruction is vital to ensure my son's success. Because of this, I support the school district, who holds the most influence over my son's educational success, being the one in charge of the funding for these students. This would allow the district's flexibility to use the resources where they believe it would most help accelerate success for these students. Maybe it would mean a district is able to hire an additional special education teacher, which is much needed based on their current rosters being maxed out. Maybe it would mean additional training for these teachers so they can be more equipped to teach our special needs students. These students deserve to be a priority. They deserve for the leaders of our state to investigate why they are underperforming and make appropriate changes to foster a positive change in our children's educational outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. So she's been waiting patiently. Did you want to speak? Are you just there to get close and listen? Yeah, yeah.
Good afternoon. Oops.
Just speak up. You'll get it.
All right.
Yep.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Wharton. I'm the Director of the Iowa Department for the Blind, and with me I have Sarah Williford, our head of our Library of Services. We're here to speak to you about the provisions of this bill that would enable us to further expand and consolidate the services provided to the blind and visually impaired students in accessible educational materials.
So the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, I'm Sarah Williford, Library Director for the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. The Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, the library, and the Instructional Materials Center are nationally recognized for our work providing access to materials, programs, and services. For more than 30 years, the IMC has produced and acquired accessible educational materials for students across the state of Iowa. The library collection has over 200,000 titles in Braille, large print, electronic text, and audio, and of these titles, over 5,000 are pre-K through 12th grade core curriculum materials, so textbooks, workbooks, and online curriculum. Our library checked out over 300,000 items in 2023 to Iowans. The library and the IMC leverage our current library collection, our expertise, AIM production resources, and a national network of Braille transcribers and large print producers to serve Iowa students who need accessible formats. Our focus is on timeliness, quality, and cost. We're committed to ensuring students have what they need to succeed. The IMC has alternative format experts and librarians on staff available to schools to locate and produce quality materials quickly and cost effectively. To date, during the 2023-2024 school year, the IMC saved school districts over $175,000 in current and future costs through the library collection. We welcome the opportunity to return to a centralized statewide system for accessible educational materials. This is what we do and what we have designed the Library and Instructional Materials Center to do, and that's provide high-quality library services and accessible educational materials to Iowans.
So were you for or against the bill?
You're speaking in support?
In support, okay, so thank you very much. So I need somebody who would be opposed to the bill. Get me back on track.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Dave Dotton. I represent the Rural School Advocates of Iowa and the School Administrators of Iowa. I myself was principal and superintendent, spent 36 years in the education system before I got into this particular position. I do want to say, we are in opposition to the bill. We do very much appreciate the teacher pay program. We would love to be able to have conversations about that to increase our teacher salaries and help us with our staff issues that we have clear across the state. In my years as a superintendent and principal, we worked with the AEAs side by side. A lot of times we agreed on things. A lot of times we just disagreed on things. They helped us in compliance. Sometimes I'd want to do things and they say, no, Dave, you can't do that. You need to do this. Okay, so we did with our IEP kids. They provided professional development and they provided teacher coaching, and they were meeting the needs of the district as we needed them. An example of that would be mental health services. Prior to a few years ago, many rural schools did not have access to mental health services. They just weren't the people. Because we were able to have operational sharing with the AEAs, we were able to get school social workers into buildings and provide therapy for kids, which is desperately needed in a lot of school districts. This particular bill prohibits that from happening as a part of the operational sharing agreements. AEAs are not included in that. The conversation about local control of funds has some merit to it, and I know that there are differing opinions across the state among superintendents about whether or not they should have those funds. I will tell you, I represent over 2,000 school administrators and over 170 rural schools. I've probably been in 15 different superintendent meetings, and not one individual has come up to me and said, I hate this. We need to do this bill. This bill is important. Not one has said this bill is important and we need to support it. We have differing opinions, but in the end, what I really believe is regardless of what happens, rural schools will suffer. I think there are some things that could work out. There are other things because of economy of scale and because of a lack of personnel that can actually do those jobs. Rural schools are going to suffer, and we're not going to be able to provide FAPE, which is in violation of federal law unless we can find somebody to come in like a speech pathologist or whatever it happens to be. I would say this, these last 2 or 3 weeks, we have had a bunch of really good conversations about this. Prior to that, there weren't any. We need to continue those conversations, take our time, do what is needed, and really study the issue. A friend of mine and I have this quote that we listened to or talked about quite a little bit. Before you tear down a fence, you better make sure you know why it was built in the first place. And AEAs were developed primarily for rural schools. So I hope that you will not move this bill forward in the third form. Thank you.
Someone in favor?
Thank you, members of the subcommittee. I'm Mackenzie Snow, Director of the Iowa Department of Education, and I'm just going to take the opportunity to address some common misconceptions about this proposal.
Use your gym voice.
Thank you. The first of which is...
Yeah, you're gonna have to speak up. They can't hear you in the room. This is on the radio.
The first of which is to ensure that no services are taken away.
There's no speaker system in the room. So yeah, we're just gonna have to do the best we can. And the kid, if you could speak up, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. So I'm here to address some common misconceptions about the proposal. And the first of which is that no services are taken away, not a cent of special education funding is reduced. This proposal is focused on improving the quality and the intensity of special education services and support. We've heard from a number of families about their children's amazing success, and we absolutely celebrate that. We want to ensure that all children have access to those high quality services and supports and instruction, and that those are consistent and equitable across the state. But we have a systems issue, and that's been identified since 2011. And the systems issue is namely around the consistency of the services and supports provided across AEAs to school districts and students and families, the clarity and the roles and responsibilities across the department, AEAs, and school districts, the quality of the services and supports, and then also insufficient local control and insufficient accountability to school districts and superintendents and locally elected school boards. I also want to address briefly the department's role and the current accountability functions referenced. So yes, there is an accreditation process in code, which has 10 accreditation standards. Only one of those accreditation standards is focused on special education. So the proposal before the subcommittee works to refocus those accreditation standards on student outcomes, and specifically the outcomes of students with disabilities, as they rightfully should be. Also, it's helpful to have some historical context. The Department of Education back in the 80s did have a division of special education that was then made a bureau. Then in 2012, it was dissolved, and then it was reestablished as a bureau in 2022. So the request and the proposal is, of course, to restore that division of special education. Additionally, the DE's role is to clarify that in fact, the DE is responsible for general supervision under federal law. It simply recognizes the role and responsibility assigned to the department in federal law. And then I also just want to briefly address local control. And it's of course difficult to connect the dots on how empowering locally elected school boards and superintendents to make choices about the funds the students they enroll generate would lead to privatization or to a lack of local control. And then just very finally on the timeline, we talked about the report in 2011. It identified many of the issues that you've heard here today, and nothing in the past decade has been done to address those systems issue. The entire life cycle of a student's education. So we cannot change what's occurred in the past, but what happens next.
Thank you, Dr. Next. You bet.
Okay. Hello, I'm Alexandra Byland, and I'm a senior at West Des Moines Valley High School, and I also serve as a student representative on the West Des Moines School Board, but I am not here speaking on behalf of the district. I am opposed to this bill, and although the special education aspect of this bill is terrible, I am more focused on the general education aspect. So as a board member, I've had the unique opportunity to learn about literacy in the state of Iowa, specific to West Des Moines, and in our K through 6 classrooms, teachers rely heavy on the AEA to ensure that each student can meet the literacy levels that they need to meet to be successful in high school and later in their adult careers. So starting in 2nd grade, teachers will utilize classroom book sets that essentially align with the standard that the state has set. So they can give students tests to measure their comprehension levels. And then if the classroom does not meet that level, they can go back into the book set and they can pull out specific activities to give kids to ensure that they meet their comprehension levels. Let's say in a 2nd grade classroom, you have 5 kids that are reading at a 4th grade level. You can give them tests specific to the 4th grade level to ensure that they are enriching their education beyond just the 2nd grade level. You're not just looking at special education students, you're looking at students that are trying to advance their learning to that higher level. And then you have kids in a classroom, that same classroom, that are reading at a kindergarten level. That teacher can go to a kindergarten classroom and pull out a kindergarten book set and give those kids kindergarten comprehension skills to ensure that they can then climb up to 2nd grade level and rejoin their peers. And so it's not just about harming special education, which is what this bill does. This bill harms special education, and it's extremely disappointing to me because I have an older sister that is a product of Iowa Public School Special Education. She's in Senior Plus right now, and she has utilized AEA tools throughout her entire education, pre-K all the way up till now in her last year of Senior Plus. but it's about the general education classrooms as well that are being disadvantaged. And I would like to note that it is disappointing that this meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday because teachers were unable to come and speak on behalf of the way they use AEA tools in their classrooms because they are in Iowa schools doing their job, teaching the future of Iowa. Thank you.
Got that to follow. Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Tibbin for Yes Every Kid. We support efforts to transform the delivery of education so that we are matching the unique needs of each individual student. And that is the reason that we support this legislation that does exactly that. By providing individual school districts the local control over their special education and educational services funds, we believe that we are putting parents and local professionals who know our students best back in the driver's seat. Districts are gaining greater flexibility, as you heard from several of the superintendents here today, to be able to match those services that best meet the needs of their unique patient or student population, excuse me. At the same time, and very much important here, the bill is creating greater oversight and accountability to ensure that those resources are getting to direct student services and not to administrative overhead. So we really appreciate this conversation. We appreciate the subcommittee coming together today and allowing the opportunity to discuss this. I encourage you to move the bill forward. Thank you.
We'll take 2 more speakers in the room.
Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Disability Rights Iowa. We serve as Iowa's protection and advocacy system. We are in strong opposition to this bill. I don't have time to go into all of the specific ways that this bill is harmful to students with disabilities, but I would like to summarize by saying the intent of this bill is to improve educational opportunities for students with disabilities. This bill would actually do the opposite. It would create additional barriers that do not exist right now. The federal law, the IDEA, requires school districts provide students with disabilities with a free appropriate public education. It does not require AEAs to provide education nor do testing. The AEAs in our current system provide highly complex technical supports to students with disabilities. They help in developing the plans for students with disabilities. They provide a wide range of multidisciplinary experts, such as speech language therapists, occupational therapists, mental health counselors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, these services that are provided by the AEA, if the AEAs were to go away, would not exist in Iowa. I think we all know there's a lack of direct care services in Iowa, and the services for students with disabilities are being provided through the AEAs. They do not exist, especially in rural Iowa. These services would not be able for school districts to find professionals, hire them, and put them in place. This is very significant for students with disabilities. Long services, long wait lists, trying to find a professional to provide these services will lead to regression for students with disabilities. Regression can happen in as quick as 9 weeks for students with disabilities. In addition, it will lead to districts not being able to comply with the federal obligations under IDEA of providing these services. The deadlines for districts to opt in or opt out is also a real concern in that districts have an obligation to provide services for students that they know exist. They also have an ongoing obligation to find students that they think might need specialized services. With a hard deadline, if a school says we're going to opt into these services or opt out, if they opt out, sorry, and a new student is discovered, they don't have the ability to provide those services or ask for help from the AEA. And so that leads to students being in limbo. Students move in and out of districts consistently. This bill would be very damaging for them. The 2011 task force report highlighted the fact that small districts right now, well, back then, 2011, did not have the resources to hire specialized professionals to serve the individual needs of the students. This has only gotten worse since that bill, since that task force. There's going to be a strong loss of expertise and training on special education. Thank you. You're being very kind to me. I'll try and wrap this up. So in summary, we strongly oppose this legislation. It would be very damaging for our Iowa students with disabilities. It would undercut the intent to improve services in education. If this committee does anything with this bill, we urge you to slow down, set a task force, really study this, look at what is working, what needs to improve. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
We started on the pro side, and we should end up with the negative. side. So we should have two more.
give you one more speaker. I honestly, we all have other meetings we have to get to. It's kind of like the guy who gets pulled over by the cops and his taillights broke out. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators. Tyler Rager, Americans for Prosperity. We're registered in support of this legislation. I appreciate the governor bringing forward a bold proposal to help Iowa's most vulnerable students rather than just relying on the status quo, which has resulted in unideal outcomes for those students. At Americans for Prosperity, we believe that all students deserve an opportunity to excel in education and to have their unique skills and gifts utilized and nurtured in an environment that best suits them. And we also know that right now that's not happening. And for those most vulnerable students, that's who this bill focuses on. That's what this bill is trying to help. The end goal is to improve those outcomes for those students. We also know right now that public schools are overburdened with regulation, and this bill seeks to give them some of that flexibility that they desperately need in order to help their students, in order to do their jobs, in order to succeed at what we task them with, which is educating the future that is going to make Iowa a better state. So in summary, we support this bill. We ask that you continue the conversation, pass it on to full committee. And I know that there's a lot of people who are concerned with the bill, but I'd ask that everyone just take a step back and realize that the focus of the bill is the children. And it's about improving their respects of them. It's about improving the outcomes of those children. So appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
okay, one more.
Thank you, Senator. You're my senator, so thank you.
Oh,
I did write you. I have a son who has many disabilities, and I want to push back a little bit about what it means to have progress and this, achievement. When I took him out in 4th grade, I spent over a year on his math facts. I did everything imaginable. And I want you to, because I homeschooled him for 4 years. And one of the reasons I homeschooled him was because of the para problem of these pairing kids who are most at risk with people with the least educational background. But there are other things that are problematic in the special education. They're constantly having to make these benchmarks. And so they're not able to step back and fill in the profound problems on the underneath because they have to keep on getting them. They have to make that benchmark. They have to make that benchmark. So when I was able to sit there for over a year, and I just want you to know that he is in algebra and he is a 4.0, and I won. And then I put him back in the schools. It was the AEAs helping me to get a 504 and to get the and they work with the teachers. The teachers, you can up their salary, but you're not going to get retention if those teachers are you simultaneously taking the supports on how they serve these kids. It's very difficult to serve my son, right? So the AEAs help that. They help try to figure out how those teachers can do that. So that's why I'm so passionate, because I really want to not take that rug from underneath. And there are things that can change. I'm not, I homeschooled for 4 years. I must not think that this is the best thing in sliced bread. But I don't think the problem is with the AEA. I think we need to fund our schools more. And I think that's the trend that happened since 2011 till now, is that we haven't adequately funded our schools. So it's an and, not a but. That's what I want to get.
With that, Senator, closing comments.
First thing I'd like to say is the Department of Ed had. If the Department of Ed, at some point in time, had concerns about AEAs in the last 12, 13 years, it sounds like, why haven't they reported that in the reports? That's one thing I've got to say. But the other thing I want to say is, there is no flexibility in this bill. It takes local control away from our schools and our districts 133 times in this bill or in the amendment. It actually was only 98 in the original bill. It's 133 in the amendment. So the local control is gone with this. $33 million is going to be removed from the schools that pays for things that schools will now have to take out of their general fund, which means they're going to lose something else somewhere because they got to pay for it somehow. So if you're unhappy with the administrative costs, then deal with the administrative costs. Don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, right? Okoboji, sorry, you're the richest district in the state. You're the highest tax, the highest property taxes anywhere. You can afford to say no. And then more executive, so there's more executive control here in the governor's office. She will have more control. She's already usurped a lot of controls. This just gives more control. The Department of Management can go in and take the money and stop you from using your levy. So this also takes more money away. So Senator Evans, I loved your dramatic start to this. I appreciate your recycling efforts at the beginning. Yes, I appreciate those efforts. This amendment is no better, and I would love it if you would do it again.
Thank you, Senator Evans, for leading the way here. I want to thank everyone that came here today. This is the public input. It's widely acknowledged, I think, that the AEA system does need a tune-up or probably more of a major overhaul. I've done a lot of work on this myself. Independent of the governor's staff and office the last few months, to prepare for this discussion. But I believe it's also widely acknowledged that we don't have all the answers in front of us today. I believe we need to continue the legislative process to find these answers. From the beginning, my commitment has been to remain focused on the singular goal of improving services and outcomes for children. That we need to listen well to all perspectives and that we need to be thoughtful in seeking solutions. I will be signing the subcommittee report today to keep this discussion going as we do with all legislation. Then I'll roll up my sleeves. I continue to find solutions that serve our children well. Thank you.
With that, I am going to sign this with amendments. Notice that's plural, so we have an amendment from the. This is a discussion that we need to continue. I'm not fully convinced that the bill that's in front of us, nor the amendments truly get to the heart of the matter. Educating our students is a three-legged stool. Department of Education, AEA, and our LEA, which is your local education association. I can test right now that those legs of those stools are not equal. And we need to shore up education across the state in its entirety. And I know that there's some angst about this, but the door is open now for some real substantive change and have some deep discussion, not just on how AEAs are providing services, but our education services in general across the state. I think we need to take advantage of that. So that's why I would like to sign this with an amendment. And with that, the subcommittee meeting is over. Thank you for your input.